our perceptions of reality. In the world, we are constantly inundated by experiences in the form of sensory data. Your version of reality from your position, no matter what that position is vastly different than that of someone standing next to you. It does not matter what it is, where you are, or who you are. The world will look different to you than it does for someone else. This is because your perspective is endlessly being shaped, sculpted, and molded into something new. It is constantly being influenced by what you see in the world around you and the ways in which you explore the world. When you keep that in mind, you know that you will be better able to understand the reasons that you look at the world. You just have to learn how to read the maps. Your senses are constantly taking in data. Although you may not be paying attention to it, there is a lot of data that you are constantly logging on the cusp of your awareness. The unconscious mind, which we will be discussing in the next chapter, is highly perceptive and is constantly aware of anything within your sensory perception. Even if you are not currently paying attention to it or focusing on it, you are still, at least unconsciously, aware that it is there. Think about it this way. Have you ever been talking to someone at a park, but suddenly ducked when a ball came flying at you? You may not have been aware of that ball consciously, but your unconscious mind was paying enough attention to your surroundings to get you to duck. You could have also done this with a spider, a snake, or any other threats. You respond automatically to the world around you because of the unconscious mind. These perceptions, however, can very quickly move above sensory into pattern recognition. Imagine that you are in a relationship with someone and you are constantly changing the ways in which you interact with the world in accordance to the way in which your relationship goes. Perhaps your partner has a tendency of sighing loudly when you make a mistake, his shoulders sagging, and a look of annoyance or disappointment on his face every time that you say something that he disagrees with. While you may not have noticed it yourself, the unconscious mind is paying attention. The unconscious mind sees that you have this problem. It knows that your partner does this every time. You then come to associate making a mistake or misunderstanding something as being a disappointment to other people. This may not exist in your conscious mind, and you may not even think about it. But every time that you make a mistake, you tell yourself that you have disappointed those around you. You tell yourself that you have messed up and that you need to fix the way in which you interact with others, all without being conscious of it. Your perception of reality is built upon all sorts of automatic thoughts such as these. It is built upon seeing how other people respond to you when you do certain things. It pays attention to the ways in which you interact with the world in certain situations. It acknowledges that you are navigating the world through the experience that you have built up over time, allowing you to recognize what it means to behave in certain ways. Everything that you have ever experienced goes into shaping those perceptions of reality that you have. From how you grew up to the problems you have faced throughout your lifetime, all of those go right into your understanding of the way in which you interact with the world. They all shape that perception. They all mold that idea that you have in the world. If you have experienced that spiders are scary, every time that you see one, you will navigate as if that spider is terrifying. It could be that you were bitten. It could be that you saw someone else panicking over a spider. It could be something that you learned about spiders that made them scary in the first place. That perception of reality that you have built up is what leads to that fear of the spiders in the world. You will develop perceptions about just about anything that you encounter. While people do not like to admit it, we are quite likely to make our own judgments about the world that we experience. We are constantly judging everything as these evaluations are created and then applied. And very quickly, we suddenly have our own mental images of the world around us and how everything works based upon those judgments that you have made. This is crucial for you to remember. You must be able to acknowledge these points. When you can acknowledge what is going on, you can begin to see the ways in which you interact with the world. You can begin to understand this to allow you to better see the ways that you navigate the world. These judgments and the perceptions of reality become the way that you do manage to interact. They guide you. They all come together to create your mental maps. The mind and mental mapping. When you gather up all of your perceptions about reality, you come up with what is known as mental maps. You are constantly mental mapping. This involves you creating the way in which you can navigate the world around you. It creates the ways in which you are able to better understand the world around you and how you navigate everything that you do explore within your world. When it comes right down to it, you create these maps that dictate the way in which you interact with the world based on those perceptions. These maps will show you what it is that you must do to better work with the world around you. When you work through the world based on the mental maps that you create, you can know that you are essentially following your programming. Remember that the mental maps that you create are the internal processes that you have that influence your behavior. These maps are going to dictate the way that you interact. This means that your gut reactions are always influenced by the ways in which you can see the world around you. They are determined by the perceptions that you build up over time. When it comes down to it then, these are what really make up who you are and what your tendencies become when you do navigate the world around you. You must be able to ensure that your own mental maps, then, are healthy if you want to ensure that you have healthy behaviors. Ultimately, the mental maps that you have are also found within your unconscious mind. They exist underneath your perceptions, just far enough away that you are able to understand and make use of them. When it comes down to it, you must be able to really stop and reflect on the world around you to then develop that understanding of yourself and how you will need to change your own thoughts if you want to change the directions that exist within that mental map that you have. NLP and using mental maps. The mental maps that you develop are, thankfully, something that can be influenced relatively simply. Whether you choose to influence your own mental maps or to influence the mental maps of other people, the same fundamental concept applies. You are constantly living somewhere within your own mental map. Your perceptions of reality will constantly shape the world that you live within, and to expect or assert anything different would be remiss. This means that you have to accept that the world that you live in, or rather, the perception of the world that you live in, is inherently different than that of our neighbors. Your own life experiences and your upbringing will change everything, and you will never have the exact same perception on something that someone else would have. This is a major problem when it comes down to understanding other people. You must be able to recognize that no two people will have that same mindset, and that means that no two people will ever be regarded as truly able to agree. This can have other problems as well. If one person's mental map is so incredibly skewed from past traumas or problems, what can be done about it? How can you begin to repair those skewed beliefs or images that are developed in hopes of ensuring that the individual is not so negatively influenced? How can you ensure that you or someone else is able to find that healthy mind map build? Ultimately, you can learn how to influence these mental maps. You can learn how you develop that change in the ways that you interact with the world, and you can learn to alter those mental maps, either through coaching or through making use of other methods entirely. This means that you can better begin to regulate the ways in which you interact. There are several key ways in which you can begin to influence the mental maps of either yourself or others. Firstly, you can pay close attention to broaden those mental maps. If the mental maps are built up in a very narrow context, you can work to begin to broaden them out to find more effective ways to help those that must learn. You can essentially begin to stretch out that mental map that has been developed. If it is your own map that must be expanded upon, you must look at the ways in which you see the world around you. Look at the interactions that you have. Look very closely at the way in which you see the world around you, and you are likely to figure out the problems that you will have. And doing this and slowly expanding your mental maps to become something that exists within a less narrow constraint, you can usually allow yourself to stop and see that you dilute the negative or problematic maps and perceptions that you have. Secondly, you can try to work within a mind map instead. You would take the time to consider what is happening within the mental map rather than attempting to expand it. When you address the situation directly from within the mental map, you can then begin to determine how to change it. You can start to influence that mental map, especially if you are able to get control of what is going on around you. When you develop that influence over yourself or over the mind of the other person, you can begin to redirect the mental map. As you better influence the mental map, you can develop the necessary understanding that will be required for any sort of successful mindset that you could have. Finally, you can also influence the mind through the use of other NLP techniques that are not necessarily inherently designed to influence the mental map, but that will absolutely do so. In making use of NLP for yourself, you can develop a sort of flexibility for your own mindset. You can develop the power that will enable you to better control the way that you are thinking and ensure that you can better adapt to other, more beneficial mental maps instead. When it comes right down to it, you can test if your mental map that you are making use of is actually constructive through self-reflection or through reflecting on other people and their own mental maps. When it comes down to it, the easiest reflection that can be done is whether or not one's worldview is one that will bring joy or pleasure to one's life. Is it going to allow for happiness? Is it satisfying? Are you genuinely enjoying the life that you have, or are you constantly feeling like you are trapped or stuck in conflict? With an inefficient mental map, you will struggle, or the other person will struggle. It is impossible to get through life happily and healthily with a normal, well-adjusted attitude. This is not because of your own shortcomings, but rather because you're going to have a skewed worldview. You need to learn how you can realign that worldview if you hope to be able to truly be comfortable in your own skin or the world that you live within.